Hey YouTube, this is Josh with Destinations Adventure. I'm currently in Virginia, heading towards Front Royal, Virginia, where I'm going to be catching the beginning of the Shenandoah National Forest entrance, Skyline Drive. But while I'm on my way, I figured that I'd take this opportunity to do one of my vlogs. So today's subject is going to be my history in riding, when I started and what type of bikes I actually rode. So I started riding back in 2001. Prior to that, I had always admired motorcycles and had always wanted to be on one. Used to have a friend that had a little mini bike, but he would let my sister ride it, but never me. I was the youngest of 3 siblings, so I felt like I was left out. I was never able to ride one, but in 2001, I finally got my first chance to actually own a motorcycle and ride one for the very first time. So my very first bike in 2001 that I had purchased was a 2001 Suzuki GZ250. The GZ250 is compatible with, it can be compared to a old Honda Rebel, which is the entry cruiser style 250 bike for Honda. But I had never owned a bike before, like I said, and definitely not having experience riding, the GZ250 was a perfect choice starting out, even though I felt like I was oversized on it. So I was about 200 pounds, 6'1", sitting on this little tiny GZ250 cruiser. But it put a smile on my face, and it introduced me to the world of riding motorcycles. So I rode that bike all the way up through until 2007. In 2007, an opportunity presented itself for me to move up into the sport bike class. And I had never had a sport bike or never been on one. I had only ridden the 250 Suzuki. So with that being said, I ended up being able to purchase a 2006 off the showroom floor Suzuki Katana 750. Now I had seen several Katanas around, and I thought they were really cool looking streamlined bikes. This bike that I had was a maroon color. It was a beautiful sport bike. Needless to say, when I got on the motorcycle, it scared the bejeebies out of me, because I was never used to any kind of acceleration like what it had. I believe that the top speed on the bike is registered at 155 mile an hour. I wouldn't know because I never rode it that fast. But just the torque and the pull on it compared to the 250 that I was on was a shock. But it introduced me into being able to go into twisties and at higher rates of speeds and get the feel of riding around corners and stuff. So it was definitely a nice advance in my biking history. In 2009, I graduated from the GZ2 or the 750 to a Honda. It would be my first Honda that I owned, and it happened to be the CBR 1100 Blackbird. Yeah, 1100cc versus a 750. I thought my 750 was fast. Nothing compared to the CBR. Now the wonderful thing about the CBR Blackbird, it was streamlined. It was designed after the Blackbird that the Air Force flies. but they just retired several years back. But it is extremely streamlined and it looked extremely good. Not to mention it was no slouch on the power. My first time riding it, I actually got off the bike and I was literally shaking because of the amount of torque and acceleration that it had on it. I was not used to at all. But I ended up getting it anyways. And I ended up riding a motorcycle. That motorcycle was the first one that ever introduced me to the mountain riding. One day I left from home on a whim, had about $400 in the bank, and figured I'm going to try to go up to the base of the mountains, the foothills of the mountains of Tennessee, and over into North Carolina and stuff, and ride the mountains, because I'd never done it before. So I took a day, ended up going north until I hit the mountains, and I would say it was a wonderful experience. I was hooked at that point. Have been going to the mountains ever since. But that bike was comfortable enough and fast enough to get me where I needed to go. It was good for long distance riding, and when I got to experiencing it in the mountains, then I knew that I had to get something that would be either stick with that or get something that would be good for me in the mountains, the mountainous type riding. So unfortunately in 2009 I also wrecked on the CBR 1100 Blackbird. Basically what happened is I was driving and a vehicle pulled out in front of me and I had to slam on my brakes. I overreacted, pulled my front brake too hard, ended up high siding into the pavement. The bike slid down the road on its side and I ended up hitting the asphalt with my right hand and my right knee. Tore a chunk out of my right hand and my right knee. Didn't realize it till after I got through doing a series of about 6 flips before I come to a stop in the grass looking at the sky. I do remember the whole wreck. I know that as soon as I got done, the adrenaline pump was so high that I actually felt thirsty. I guess my body was going into shock, and anybody that goes into shock, they get thirsty. And I was asking for water. I saw some people that pulled over and were trying to assist me. They ended up calling an ambulance. I went to the hospital. There was no skeletal damage to me. There was no broken bones. There was just a lot. There was road rash on my right arm, on my left elbow, on my right knee, on my right palm, and I hyperextended my left knee a little bit. But overall I come out of it lucky. So basically I kept the bike. I ended up putting it back together, fixing all the cosmetic scrape damage. There was no frame damage. It was just had slid down the road, broke the front cowl, broke the sides, my side cowl. Even though I had frame sliders on it, it still scratched it up. So I put it back together the best I could. Rode it for about a year or so longer, and it just was never the same after that experience of wrecking. So I figured it was about time to turn it in. I didn't like having a damaged bike and knowing that it had went down. So I got an opportunity to get my second brand spanking new 0-mile bike, which happened to be a 2008 Kawasaki ZX14. I take that back. It wasn't brand new. It had about 1,000 miles on it. I was able to buy it used. But anyways, the ZX14 was by far the fastest bike I had ever owned. It's a super sport. The color on the bike was a very pretty yellowish green metallic, and when the sun hit it just right, it just looked like it was powder coat, beautiful green. I rode that. It wasn't as comfortable as the CBR 1100 Blackbird, so I tried to modify the seat on it, and just rode it for about a year or two, and then I just couldn't do it anymore. because the mountains were calling again, and this bike was not a long distance bike. It gets you from point A to point B in a hurry, but it wouldn't be a comfortable ride. So I ended up going with the next best thing that best fit the type of riding that I wanted. I ended up eyeballing a 2015 Kawasaki Concourse. Now the Concourse itself was also the same motor that was in the ZX14. It was just toned down. It was geared different, and instead of being chain driven, it was shaft driven. It was one of my first true sport touring bikes that's made for touring. Had the side saddles on it that came with it, and just overall beautiful bike. That bike was a burgundy wine or maroon, whatever you want to call it. It was that dark maroon color. Also had metal flake in it, so it would reflect whenever the sun was shining on it. Beautiful bike. That bike there, I probably put about 30,000 miles on, and I rode it to the mountains about 7 different times. Unfortunately, it still wasn't good enough because I wanted to start having my wife experience the ride with me. So what I ended up doing is I ended up getting rid of that bike, and I ended up upgrading to the one I'm riding now, the 2018 Honda Goldwing Tour. I did a review on this on a prior video. I know that it sounded like I was bashing the Honda in general, but I wasn't. Even though I've had a few issues and quirks with this this motorcycle from the start, I've worked through it, and I wouldn't trade this bike in for the world. This is the best thing that's happened, especially the fact that it's a luxury class motorcycle, and that I actually got the opportunity to share the mountain riding experience with my wife on this just this last summer, and it was a beautiful thing. Now I'm on my solo trip through the mountains. I do usually about twice a year, and I just hope that I have a lot of good adventures to come. I know this video is a little bit longer than what I expected, but there you go. There's just a history of my riding since 2001. I've been in one motorcycle accident. I've probably dropped a bike over the course of all the bikes I've owned. Probably dropped the bike maybe about 5 times collectively, but that was just pea gravel when you're trying to back the bike up, or trying to ride through sugar sand, or in the grass, and it just lost traction. But I have not dropped this motorcycle, and I don't plan on ever dropping it. Hopefully I'm past that point in my life. As of now, it's that I end up dropping stuff. Anyways, I've rambled on long enough. If y'all like videos like this, please click that like button. Drop some comments in the comment section. Let me know what type of things you would like to hear me talk about. Click the subscribe if you haven't already, and also click on that bell once you subscribe, so that every time I have a new video come out, you'll be notified. But that's it for now. I'm gonna go ahead and sign out. Y'all be safe out there. Peace.